Dinosaurs often capture our imagination as the ultimate prehistoric giants. However, these Mesozoic titans were far from the first creatures to dominate life on Earth. Billions of years before the first dinosaur walked the land, other extraordinary animals ruled the planet's oceans and continents. But why don't we talk about them as much? From ancient seas filled with bizarre predators to swampy forests teeming with massive insects, each era of deep prehistoric history had its own dominant creatures. Today we embark on a journey into the past to explore the life that reigned before the age of dinosaurs. Our story begins in the Precambrian era, which unfolded around 4.6 billion years ago. This period witnessed the gradual cooling of the planet and the formation of the first oceans. During this time, Earth's surface became a dynamic environment where chemical reactions gradually laid the foundation for life. Volcanic activity, frequent meteorite impacts, and a shifting climate created the necessary conditions for the emergence of the first organic molecules, which began to combine into simple compounds. Around 3.8 to 3.5 billion years ago, life first appeared in the form of single-celled organisms. Bacteria and archaea arose as microscopic colonies capable of surviving in extreme conditions. These early cells had metabolic functions that allowed them to extract energy from their surroundings, gradually altering the composition of the oceans and atmosphere. Their biochemical activity triggered a chain of environmental changes that were crucial for the later development of more complex organisms. As microbial colonies expanded, they began forming layered structures known as stromatolites, built by the repetitive growth of photosynthetic bacteria. Stromatolites slowly accumulated sedimentary layers, some of which are still visible in fossils today. The oxygen produced by these organisms gradually enriched the atmosphere, making the planet increasingly hospitable for future life. Fossilized stromatolites served as some of the earliest and most tangible evidence of life on Earth, marking a crucial step in evolutionary history. Later in the Precambrian, during the Ediacaran period, approximately 635 to 541 million years ago, the first multicellular organisms appeared. This period saw the emergence of the Ediacaran biota, a collection of soft-bodied organisms that left only faint imprints in sedimentary rocks. Fossils of creatures such as Dickinsonia and Spergina exhibit body shapes distinctly different from those of modern animals. Although relatively simple, these organisms represented a significant leap from single-celled life to organized multicellular structures, hinting at evolutionary experiments that would later lead to greater complexity. Ediacaran organisms began copying ecological niches in a world still shaped by environmental upheavals. Lacking hard shells or bones, their preservation depended largely on favorable conditions that allowed soft tissues to leave lasting impressions. These fossils suggest that specialized cell types and primitive tissue organization were already beginning to develop, laying the evolutionary groundwork for the astonishing biodiversity of later periods. And yet, over 540 million years ago, during the Cambrian period, life on Earth was confined entirely to the seas. This is where the story of our first great rulers of the planet begins. The Cambrian period witnessed an astonishing evolutionary surge known as the Cambrian explosion, during which an incredible variety of strange marine creatures emerged. In a relatively short span of geological time, most major animal body plans appeared for the first time. This alien underwater world saw the rise of the first complex animals, laying the foundation for all future life. In the Cambrian seas, life evolved at an unprecedented pace. The oceans teemed with invertebrates, creatures without backbones, including trilobites scuttling along the seafloor, and strange gelatinous animals drifting through the water. Trilobites, in particular, thrived for over 270 million years, evolving into countless species and becoming a defining feature of Paleozoic marine ecosystems. During this period, nearly all major animal groups made their debut. There were no jawed fish, no reptiles, and certainly no land animals. Just a water world filled with bizarre forms that set the stage for future evolution. Among the strange marine landscape, one creature stood out as the apex predator, Anomalocaris, reaching up to 1.5 feet in length. It was enormous for its time. Its body was shrimp-like and flexible, with a pair of spiny appendages at the front for grasping prey and a circular tooth-lined mouth for crushing it. 2 large compound eyes provided Anomalocaris with its sharp vision, allowing it to spot prey in the dim Cambrian waters. It likely fed on smaller animals, possibly even trilobites, tearing them apart with its unusual jaws. In the absence of fish or larger predators, this formidable arthropod was the undisputed top hunter of the Cambrian oceans. As the Ordovician period began around 485 million years ago, life continued to thrive beneath the waves. Some creatures even grew larger. This time marked the appearance of the first primitive fish, though they were tiny, jawless creatures often encased in bony armor. However, the giants of the Ordovician seas were not fish at all. They were cephalopods, ancient relatives of squid and octopuses. One of the dominant predators was a massive, straight-shelled cephalopod, a squid-like creature living inside a rigid cone-shaped cell. Species like Precambrian could grow up to 30 feet long, gliding through warm, shallow seas. Using tentacles to capture prey and a beak-like mouth to consume it, these colossal mollusks hunted anything smaller than themselves, from shellfish to trilobites. Indeed, during this era, the top oceanic predator was a giant shell-covered squid, likely the largest animal on Earth at the time. After a brief mass extinction, the Silurian period, which began around 444 million years ago, saw life rebound and even take its first steps onto land. The earliest simple plants, such as tiny mosses, began to green the barren coastal landscapes, though the land remained mostly desolate. While fossil evidence is scarce, some hardy arthropods, possibly primitive millipedes and scorpions, are believed to have been among the first animals to venture onto land during this time. In the water, jawed fish became more common, and the first sharks and bony fish emerged. However, dominance often belonged to another predator. Giant sea scorpions known as eurypterids prowled Silurian rivers and shallow seas. Some, like the Jactylopterus, reached over 8 feet long, making them among the largest arthropods in history. Armed with spiny claws and a paddle-like tail, the sea scorpion could launch swift attacks on fish and other prey in murky waters. At a time when life on land was just beginning, these fearsome eurypterids ruled aquatic food chains. Following the Silurian period, the Devonian, spanning 419 to 359 million years ago, is often called the Age of Fishes. The oceans teemed with life and new predators emerged. Fish diversified into numerous forms. Primitive sharks roamed the depths. Lobe-finned fish with strong fins hunted in coastal shallows, and bony fish of all shapes swarmed reef ecosystems. Coral-like organisms built reef systems that provided habitats for this marine abundance. Meanwhile, on land, plants advanced further, and the first forest of tall trees and ferns spread across some continents, subtly altering the atmosphere. Some adventurous lobe-finned fish even began to venture onto land, evolving into the earliest amphibious tetrapods. However, deep in the water, some fish were transforming into true giants, ready to dominate their native environment. One such giant was Dunkleosteus, a massive armored fish that ruled the late Devonian seas. Growing up to 33 feet long, it had a front half covered in thick bony plates, forming a formidable armored head and jaws. Instead of teeth, Dunkleosteus had a sharp-edged bony plate in its powerful jaws, capable of slicing flesh and even crushing bone. With one of the strongest bites among all fish, it could easily take down large prey, possibly even other armored fish. This giant likely patrolled ancient waters, launching explosive attacks to capture its victims. With few creatures daring to challenge it, Dunkleosteus sat confidently at the top of the Devonian marine food chain. Unfortunately, at the end of the Devonian period, environmental upheavals triggered another mass extinction in the oceans, bringing an end to the reign of such giants. This shift marked the beginning of life's transition from the seas to the land, heralding the dawn of the Carboniferous period. Around 359 to 299 million years ago, as the Devonian gave way to the Carboniferous period, life on land flourished like never before. Vast tropical swamp forests covered much of the continents, filled with towering club moss trees, horsetails, and ferns. These plants would eventually become today's coal deposits, giving the period its name. Atmospheric oxygen levels were exceptionally high, over 30% compared to today's 21%. In this humid, lush world, arthropods, including insects, spiders, and millipede relatives, grew to astonishing sizes. In the air, dragonfly-like insects such as Meganura, with a wingspan of more than 2 feet, flitted among the treetops, hunting other insects. With no birds or bats yet present, these giants ruled the skies. On the ground, millipede-like creatures also reached enormous proportion. The most impressive was Arthropleura, a millipede relative that grew over 8 feet long, crawling through the leaf litter. Alongside them throughout the Carboniferous period, massive amphibians lurked in the waters of the coal swamps, dominating the vertebrate food chain. Often referred to as labyrinthodonts, these creatures resembled giant salamanders or crocodile-like fish with limbs. One example, Ediacaran, also known as Pholodurpodon, could grow up to 13 feet long. With an elongated eel-like body, Ediacaran lurked in grassy rivers and murky lakes. using its powerful tail to move through the water while ambushing fish and small tetrapods. Its thick skin and robust build allowed these amphibians to dominate their habitat. Meanwhile, the first small reptiles had appeared on land by the late Carboniferous, but these lizard-like creatures were still minor players in an ecosystem ruled by giant insects and amphibians. For millions of years, these steamy, carbon-rich swamps remained the domain of enormous arthropods in the air and on land, and monstrous amphibians in the water. 299 to 252 million years ago, at the beginning of the Permian period, Earth's continents had merged into the supercontinent Pangaea, and the climate in many regions was becoming increasingly arid and extreme. The once vast swamps of the Carboniferous period were shrinking, making survival difficult for amphibians that had once thrived there due to the lack of water. In this changing world, new reptilian species rose to prominence, particularly the synapsids, ancient creatures often referred to as mammal-like reptiles, which were early relatives of mammals. These reptiles had key advantages such as scaly skin and shelled eggs, allowing them to live away from water and outlast their amphibian predecessors in dry conditions. Among them were formidable predators and large herbivores, unlike anything seen before. In the early Permian, one of these predators was Dimetrodon, a sail-back carnivorous synapsid. Dimetrodon grew over 14 feet long and walked on 4 sprawling legs. It had a distinctive tall sail on its back, supported by its spine, which may have helped it absorb sunlight or regulate body temperature. Its massive skull was armed with sharp teeth of various sizes, including long canines perfect for piercing flesh. Dimetrodon likely hunted anything it could catch, from large insects to amphibians and small reptiles. With few other large predators around, it ruled the food chain in its environment, dominating Permian river valleys and plains, much like big cats dominate their territories today. Meanwhile, the Permian oceans had their own fearsome hunters. One of the most notable was the Helicoprion, a shark-like fish known for its bizarre spiral of serrated teeth in its lower jaw, resembling a circular saw blade. Growing up to 25 feet long, Helicoprion likely used its spiral jaw to slice through soft-bodied prey such as squid and fish. As the Permian period progressed, the balance of power on land continued to shift. Rugged herbivores known as perisaurs, tank-like reptiles the size of large pigs or cows, roamed the landscape, their bodies protected by bumpy skin and bony scales. Lurking in the shadows were the Gorgonopsians, a terrifying group of synapsid predators. The largest, Anostrancevia, grew to about 11.5 feet in length and had a long, narrow skull with saber-like fangs, similar to a saber-toothed cat. With powerful limbs and a sturdy spine, it could sprint in short bursts to catch its prey. When attacking, Anostrancevia used its saber-like teeth to deliver deep, lethal bites. These Gorgonopsids were the apex predators of the late Permian, fulfilling a role similar to big cats, long before true mammals even existed. Actually, by this time, mammal-like reptiles of various shapes and sizes dominated the land, both as predator and prey. Life had come a long way from the early Cambrian seas. A complex web of animals now spanned the continents. But all of this was about to be tested by an unprecedented catastrophe. Around 252 million years ago, the reign of the Permian beast came to a dramatic end. Earth experienced the most devastating mass extinction in its history, so extreme that it was named the Great Dying. Massive volcanic eruptions in Siberia released greenhouse gases and ash into the atmosphere, triggering climate chaos. The oceans became toxic and suffered oxygen depletion, and nearly all food chains collapsed. Over 90% of marine species and around 70% of land species perished during this Permian Triassic extinction event. The dominant synapsids and many other creatures that had ruled the Permian landscape were wiped out. Lush forests turned into barren wastelands. This cataclysm essentially reset the planet, and it would take millions of years for ecosystems to fully recover. After the extinction from about 252 to 247 million years ago, the early Triassic period was a desolate time. With most large animals gone, the survivors inherited a much emptier world. One of them was Lystrosaurus, a squat tusk herbivore about the size of a pig. In some early Triassic fossil sites, nearly every vertebrate fossil belongs to Lystrosaurus, suggesting it dominated these post-apocalyptic landscapes. Living in large herds, it fed on tough, low-growing plants in scrubby environments. For a brief period, this unassuming creature became one of the most successful animals on Earth. As the Triassic period continued, life gradually rebounded, and new groups of animals rose to prominence. Among them were the archosaurs, the ancestors of crocodiles, pterosaurs, and eventually dinosaurs. By around 230 million years ago, the first true dinosaurs had appeared. These early dinosaurs were relatively small and modest, coexisting with other reptiles and surviving synapsids. However, for most of the Triassic, the dominant predators were other reptiles. Giant crocodile-like archosaurs, known as Rauisuchians, such as Postosuchus, grew 16 to 20 feet long and were fearsome hunters that overshadowed much of the world. Yet dinosaurs were ready to expand. When another smaller extinction event occurred at the end of the Triassic, many competing large reptiles disappeared, leaving the stage open. In the following Jurassic period, dinosaurs rapidly diversified and rose to dominance in Earth's ecosystems. However, let's not forget that before the age of dinosaurs began, the world was ruled by a completely different cast of creatures. Anomalous arthropods, giant fish, monstrous amphibians, and mighty proto-reptiles. From Anomaluricaris to Inostrancevia, these long extinct beings were the rulers of their time. Their rise and fall demonstrate the ever-changing nature of life on Earth, and their fossils preserved for hundreds of millions of years serve as a reminder that without these incredible creatures, our modern world would not exist.